We're gonna spread happiness. We're gonna spread freedom.
In this week's oversight hearing, the chief public advocate for the Consumers' Rights League testified, quote, ACORN routinely says it will clean up its act, yet, given its decade-long history of voter fraud, embezzlement, and misuses of taxpayer funds, ACORN's pattern of fraud can no longer be dismissed as a series of unfortunate events.
John Fung, you saw that. You wrote a book about it. You're from the Wall Street Journal, and the name of your book, Stealing Elections. So, do you think they're going to clean up their act?
I hope so. I hope they come forward and explain how they're going to clean up their act, but they've been pretty invisible so far. They've been invisible because last July it was discovered that the founder of ACORN, who was still the president, his brother was a financial officer of the company and embezzled $1 million. That happened a dozen years ago.
Shouldn't he be in Washington?
Well, here's the thing. His brother embezzled this money a dozen years ago. They didn't tell the authorities, they didn't tell their own board of directors, and they kept the guy employed for 12 years until the scandal broke was the time he was fired. I think ACORN has a suspect and problematical history, and I don't think they want to defend it.
Okay, but let's face, they're doing the good thing. They're wanting to get out people
I'm in favor of registering voters, but not this way.
Right.
They're legal voters.
So for people who are not familiar with ACORN, what are the allegations against them? What are they doing wrong?
They have had people convicted of voter fraud in St. Louis and Kansas City and Seattle and several other states. Right now there's an active investigation of 37 of their employees in Wisconsin. There's a former employee who's under indictment for perjury in Pennsylvania. They registered a 14-year-old boy in North Carolina. They're at best very sloppy, and at worst perhaps, tending towards, I think, subverting the election laws. And I think ACORN is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the problems with voter fraud and voter irregularities we're going to see. This is the visible part with voter registrations. Wait till we get to the actual voting.
And you're suggesting that obviously ACORN is working on behalf of Barack Obama and the Democrats, but what's interesting about this, who exactly was ACORN's attorney?
For all of their lead election law cases, it was Barack Obama. And
Barack Obama was ACORN's attorney.
Yes, and he was also their chief trainer at their annual conferences.
What does that mean?
Well, he was the guy who would teach them about community organizing.
Obama's gonna change it. Obama's gonna lead 'em.
Election Board Director Ray James blames the liberal advocacy group Association of Community Organizations for Reform Now, known as ACORN. 3 former Kansas City workers face federal charges for submitting bogus registration cards. Authorities are looking for a 4th worker.
They basically raped our voter rolls in a very abusive and irresponsible way.
Of the 35,000 cards ACORN hand-delivered during its Get Out the Vote campaign, James characterizes 85% of them as trash, littered with fictitious names and forged signatures, not matching election lists.
How do we know who we should put on the rolls when there's 10 or 12 of the same name?
Bogus names, he says, did make it onto the rolls. How many and whether illegal votes were cast are questions James cannot answer until the election has been analyzed.
We're gonna change it and rearrange it.
What started out as a drug raid in northeast Albuquerque turned into much more. APD says it went inside a home on Pennsylvania Avenue and uncovered 7 voter registration forms containing what they call vital information. But officers say since the deadline to turn in voter registration forms has passed, they are not worried about fraudulent IDs being created. Their main concern now is if someone's stealing your right to vote.
Again, if these are not fraudulent and these are legal documents, these people are going to go to vote and they're not going to be allowed to vote because these documents didn't get turned into the clerk's office.
Police arrested a Cuban national who claimed he was working to gather voters for the organization ACORN.
We're gonna change the world.
One of the worst recent voter scandals happened in Washington State 2 years ago. Voter registration forms for 1,800 people were submitted by the activist organization ACORN. ACORN even threatened to sue election officials there if they didn't accept the registrations. But there was only one problem. Only 6 of the 1,800 names were real people. All the rest were fake. The ACORN workers did admit that they made the names up. You believe this? They actually sat in the Seattle Public Library there at a table and even randomly picked out names from the phone books. One worker said he even would sit at home making the names up and smoke marijuana.
We're gonna spread happiness. We're gonna spread freedom.
The Democrats have included a provision that says not less than 20% of any profit realized from these investments, part of that would go to this group, ACORN. And the House Republicans tell us they are fighting to get this thing removed. It hasn't been yet. James, why is it a problem?
Well, I think it's a problem because when you look at ACORN's structure, they're a massive organization. There are 150 subsidiary organizations with already this year a $110 million budget, and their voter registration activities have spawned investigations in over almost a dozen states. And we're talking about millions of registrations, thousands and tens of thousands of fraudulent registrations, and which is not to even mention that the fact that of that $110 million, a significant portion of this operation is being funded by the taxpayers already. And to put this organization, to earmark money for this organization ahead of the taxpayers is just outrageous.
Obama's gonna change it. Obama's gonna lead 'em.
The Association of Community Organizations for Reform Now, or ACORN, does not go door to door, but in public places they admit at times they employ criminals who they say, like law-abiding citizens they employ, make great workers. Audrey Padilla works for the nonprofit organization ACORN, registering people to vote.
I think it's a really powerful thing to vote.
But the information she gathers on this form can be powerful if criminals get their hands on it, and they have. Jeffrey Mahaffey did, and he was convicted in 2 counts of raping a child, a habitual offender who stole a car. Yvonne Chacon did too. She pleaded no contest to 2 counts of forgery, 7 more counts are pending, and so are 3 counts of credit card fraud. Michelle Real also collected voter information for ACORN while under the supervision of probation and parole for drug possession and 1 count of identity theft.
It's very alarming and very concerning to me.
We showed Albuquerque Police Chief Ray Schultz the records of 9 people accused or convicted of crimes who collected voter registration information for ACORN.
This information, is in the hands of the wrong person. It can be devastating.
ACORN does not conduct background checks on its employees. The police chief says it should. The spokeswoman says now that we brought this to their attention, they're thinking about it.
We're gonna change it and rearrange it.
Ken, first of all, we know that Barack Obama not only represented legally this radical group, ACORN, a group that has been accused of fraud in how many states now, just this year alone, but also
several.
His campaign has paid $800,000 to this group. If you don't have the proper checks and balances, in other words, you can register and vote the same day, isn't this just setting ourselves up for massive voter fraud and perhaps worse?
Let me just alleviate some of your fears, Sean, by saying that they might register and vote on the same day, but those votes won't be counted until they're scrutinized on Election Day. Now, you paint an interesting and accurate picture of a disturbing pattern of associations. So now it's not just ACORN, it's Bill Ayers, and it is Saul Alinsky. And we're not out of the A's yet. That is a disturbing pattern. Alinsky, Ayers, ACORN. And here is a totally discredited organization that the Democrats in Congress were trying to funnel even more millions of dollars to.
I am considering all the allegations of voter fraud, considering the importance, the real importance in this election and in the last number of elections. No Republican's going to win the White House if they don't win the state of Ohio. I believe that.
Absolutely.
All right, so are we looking at an effort with Barack Obama funding associating with this radical group and this court ruling, the potential that there's going to be an attempt to steal the state of Ohio?
Well, let me put it to you this way, Sean. In 2004, George Bush won Ohio by about 118,000 votes. If you had turned 60,000 votes, it would have been President Kerry.
We're gonna change the world.